But
Well, what is it?
I had talked about this on the morning grind, that
Mhm.
my analysis, that it happened to be that both you and I had analyzed Anakin Skywalker for different reasons.
Yeah.
Would you like to provide some insight? Because I just went through the Phantom Menace, and so that was part of what Brianna and I talked about. So Brianna and I talked about that, but Brianna had analyzed the whole arc. Do you
Let me
want to?
go get my
Do you want?
notes. Yeah.
You grab your notes. Okay, so you do that. Okay,
I'm
let's do
gonna,
that.
I'm gonna
Let's do
take
this.
off a layer too. I'm getting kind of warm.
All right, all right. I think that would be a fun thing to do, because as it happens, Brianna and I see. I was told to study Anakin's Skywalker's arc in Phantom Menace for the story that I'm working on right now in the Tales of Rapavania. And like I said, I think I'm starting to nail it in the beginning now. But Brianna and I both have interests in story arcs of corruption or the fall.
Yeah.
Now, she and I have also talked about what the difference between those two might be, but those kinds of things. So she and I have been studying those, because Theophany, that I'm working on, tells the story of the fall of Lucifer. And then Brianna is also, I don't know how much she said about what particular story, but she's also got those arcs about corruption and the fall. And so we both happen to hit on needing to study what Anakin Skywalker came up with. And I was critical in mine. Now, this is a morning grind episode. I might clip it out, but if you find the morning grind episode where I talk about the Phantom Menace and Anakin Skywalker, I'm actually quite critical of Anakin Skywalker's arc. I just do an X-ray of just his story in the Phantom Menace, because there's a whole lot of other things going on in that movie, which makes it difficult to even tell who the main character is. But if you just X-ray his story, you get some weirdness.
Yes.
But Brianna went even further than that, into the entire kind of corruption kind of arc. So this is, I think this would be a great time to talk about this, since we're both here. So, all right, I'll let you.
Oh boy, you give me the stage. I can talk about this forever. So,
okay.
So here's the thing. I'll give a little bit of background. I grew up on the sequels, or the prequels, shall we say, and Star Wars was a pretty big part of my childhood, I would say. In fact, it was even side note, but it was when I went to in theaters as I was 11 years old to watch Episode 3. That I decided I wanted to be a filmmaker. It wasn't because of Star Wars. It was because while we were watching, I was with my dad and I was watching all the trailers, and I was complaining about every single movie coming out. And I realized I had a lot of opinions about storytelling. I was like, oh, I guess I should just make movies if I care so much about them. That was my 11-year-old decision. So anyway, so Star Wars, I'm very, like, I know the stories very well, but I was always very unsatisfied with Anakin's arc, and I never really thought about it in depth. I just kind of wanted something more, and over time, that craving has gotten stronger and stronger, and this is why I ended up writing that screenplay that I just finished, Dark Goddess, which is that I really wanted to have a story where you had, a classic hero. So not like some whiny brat, but like an actual hero, like a Luke Skywalker type character, your Frodo Baggins or whatever, who is tempted by the dark side, which happens all the time. Luke is, Frodo is, but actually corrupts and becomes a villain, and isn't redeemed. So I wanted to know, like, what that would look like. And there's a lot of stories that do this, but not so like The Godfather. I haven't watched the entirety of Breaking Bad, so I don't know how it ends, so don't spoil it for me. But so there's plenty of good corruption arcs out there, but I wanted one that was specifically in like a fantasy context. So I went and tried to study, and I'm still in the process, I would say, of studying the corruption arc. I understand it now, but I haven't watched every single one out there. So I'm still doing that. But so one of the things that I was trying to break down was what it was about Anakin's journey that didn't work for me. So before I do that, though, I want to break down the journey, the Godfather movie. And this was kind of like my take on it, because there is this other theory about corruption arcs that is in some ways better, I would say, but it's a little bit different. And it is from, I found it from this blogger. I highly recommend KM Weiland or Wieland. I'm not sure how you say her name, but she has this blog called, I should make sure I can get the exact link for you guys, because I do recommend it. Making something about writers becoming authors. Make sure I get the exact one here. Helping writers become authors. That's what's called. Helping writers become authors.com. So anyway, she has a really good one. But before I read hers, my breakdown basically in The Godfather was that it goes like this. You have your hero. So hero being defined as someone who does the right thing for the right reason. Over time, you have the hero tainted. So they still haven't done the wrong thing, but they're being tempted by the dark side, so to speak. So they're and then eventually they become an anti-hero. In the case of The Godfather, that is exactly at the halfway point. So anti-hero in this context is someone who just either does the wrong thing for the right reason. So in the case of The Godfather, it's committing murder to protect his father. Or you could do the right thing for the wrong reason. So your motivation starts to shift. Example would be, you're doing something in order to save the world versus you're doing it in order to rule the world, but it's the same goal. And then, I would say that he became the anti-hero darkening. His motivation becomes more and more corrupted, right? And then eventually he becomes a villain. A villain is someone who does the wrong thing for the wrong reason. You don't root for them at all. Or maybe you do, but you shouldn't. So I was like, okay, what happens in Anakin's journey? So there's some things about Anakin that really could work because there's the setup I think is actually really good. Because one of the things, if you have a corruption arc, right, you need to know why, like what is the reason why this person is going to be tempted. And so in Anakin's case, that would be fear. Fear is his you have that cheesy thing from Yoda. Fear is the path to the dark side. What does he say? Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. So he just tells you what's going to happen in the thing.
Well, and I brought up in my analysis that I think that's kind of a questionable philosophy on the Jedi's part, especially the way they apply it. But that's also the difference between the plot and story that we're talking about. We're talking about story right here.
Right. We're talking about character development.
Jay says, I really like it when a hero ends up getting corrupted. If well written, it makes them feel more human.
Yeah. And a side note here, because and this goes kind of into some of the stuff that K.M. Weiland talks about, that basically you're always going to have some element of that for any hero. A well-written hero has something that they have some moral need, something that they need to, something also that John Truby talks about a lot in his book, The Anatomy of Story. It's like one of my favorite all-time books. Highly recommend. Where you have a moral need that over time, in a heroic arc, the character will learn, usually right at the climax, they will learn what that moral need is and they will change. So for example, I like Heath has this in his story where it's should you live your life selfishly or should you live it for others? And so you have a character that is acting selfish, but then at the end they decide to live selflessly, and so that's how they learn. But then in a corruption arc, it's the same setup. You have a hero who has some sort of a flaw, but they don't learn their lesson. Instead, they go deeper into the flaw. So that's the difference. So there should always be, even in your heroes who have a heroic arc, there should always be some element of they're not perfect, because no one is. So anyway, so the thing about Anakin's arc is it's super choppy, right? We don't have this like steady, natural progression of, you're starting to do more wrong things over time. You're starting to, compromise your values and things like that. So he starts off as this, this innocent kid. Like I said, he has a good setup. I'd actually finish describing the setup. So there's fear, and then there's also anger. He's very disempowered when he starts off. Also he has this inherent arrogance to his personality. So the hunger for power can come out of that. It also comes out of a desire to, not lose a sense of control. So he has these tragedies that happen to him, and he wants to make sure they don't happen again. Like, that's a great setup, but it's not executed well. So you don't ever see him as like a hero. You don't ever see him as this guy who, he's imperfect, but he has all these admirable traits. Like he isn't admirable enough, I feel like. So he doesn't start at a good place.
Brianna and I both came up with that we were missing a scene where he typified the hero in every way.
Yeah.
Even arguably when he's supposed to be doing that early as an adult, by the way, because I said I didn't really think he needed to start as a child. But when you're
Kids shouldn't have those kinds of. I wouldn't even put that on like a young kid.
well, I would say he's acting heroically when he was a kid because I talked about the kind of arc that he's trying to develop as a kid.
I see.
But I think we wanted to see that as him as actually an adult, a capable adult, and fulfilling a heroic role, and not without snark and nastiness. Because in order to have the fall or the corruption, you got to see him as seriously pure. We saw him as a pure child, but
actually, that's not true.
Not true.
Actually, so technically, the way a corruption arc is defined is that it's just a change in value in a negative direction. So you could have someone who is an anti-hero who then becomes a villain, and that's a corruption arc. You could have someone who's already a villain who just becomes a worse villain, and that's still a corruption arc. But it wasn't what I wanted. This wasn't what I was craving in a story, which is why I wrote my own. Yeah, so we have him here as this sort of angsty teen. He's not exactly a hero, but you know, you can kind of root for him a little bit, I guess. But he's mainly kind of annoying, so you don't really ever like him that much. And then all of a sudden, he becomes a murderer, like out of nowhere. So so he lost his mother. He, despite his arrogance, he had this arrogance over his ability. Well, what? Sorry, I'm trying to reread what I just wrote. What was the sentence? Despite his arrogance over his abilities, he still wasn't enough to save her. All this stuff. So I mean, technically, I guess I could imagine in that situation that he might have killed someone in rage, or he might have done something violent in rage when his mother is killed. But what isn't believable is that he would then just go and kill all of their friends and family, the women and the children. Dude's like, what is this leap? What? It's like that was where he should have ended up. It's like, a corruption arc, you want it to be like a steady progression. His goes like this, and then, and it's like, it's just like so jaggedy. And then, and I'm kind of summarizing, but basically the same thing happens later. You have the setup, like you can see why he would corrupt, but the leap isn't believable to me. Like he goes from, thinking I need to be on the dark side in order to save Padme, to I am going to murder children, and I'm going to I'm going to kill all the Jedi. Like it wasn't set up believably to me that he needed to do those things to save Padme. Like you would think that at that point he would still, like, he wouldn't go that far. And also the fact that he went from not trusting the Jedi Council to thinking the Jedi were evil. It was like it wasn't a believable transition. It was just kind of like sudden radical shift. And I guess in defense of the story, if you look really closely, you can see more elements of things being set up, but you have to like squint at them. And so it feels very sudden and abrupt, all of his shifts. And that's my main criticism of it. Yeah, basically that's the summary.
Okay, I've got a couple other things to say on that, but there was also another point that you and I talked about that was that when you were comparing and contrasting the role of the woman
I forgot about that.
Yeah, because you talked about what role the love interest plays in The Godfather versus what interest Padme plays, and it's night and day difference, and it's better in The Godfather.
It doesn't have to be a love interest, but there needs to be someone in the story who is pushing back, who is the voice of moral reason, basically. And so in The Godfather, it is his love, it's his love interest in both cases. I think her name was Kay, where she is the one that, when he says things, when he's starting to like express a little bit past the middle of the movie, and it's, I guess, end of second act or so, where he's at the beginning, he says things like, that's my family, okay, that's not me. And then later he's making excuses for his family, like, oh, my father's just like any powerful man, he protects people and all this stuff. And she's like, do you know how delusional you sound? Like, like he gets people killed. Like that's not you can't justify that. So she's the one saying those things. So it's good to have you need to have someone in the story that does that. She's also the one at the end. This is something John Truby talks about in that book I was telling you about earlier, where if you have a tragedy and the main character corrupts in some ways, they will not have the self-awareness to notice their own fall, but someone else should. So she plays that role. She's the one looking in, and that famous last shot, seeing what he has become. Meanwhile, in the prequels in Star Wars, you have Padme. There's that moment when he confesses to her like the mass murder that he just committed, and she's just like gives him a hug. It's like, what? She should push back a little bit. Like, can you say something? Can you be like, don't do that? It's like,
Right,
can you
right.
at minimum? Like,
See,
like, oh,
and I was saying this is one of those situations where people talk about should you have oh wait, what's the word that uncompromising love? Wait, no, what is the word? No,
unconditional love.
unconditional. Yeah, should you love someone unconditionally? Because I hear that from people like relationship experts on Instagram and things like that today. That like love should be unconditional. You should love people unconditionally, and I'm like, no, that is a terrible idea. My love is not unconditional because if I came home, for instance, and my wife told me, Heath, I've just drowned all of our children in the bathtub, I would not go, that's okay. My love is unconditional. No, my love would end right there. That would be the end of the love.
To be fair, I don't think that's what people mean when they say unconditional. I think it's like,
Well,
I will love you if you do these things, but
yeah, I know,
there are
but
limits.
unconditional is a big thing. Like if you say, I love you unconditionally. But that is definitely what Padme is experiencing here. He can come to her and say, I've just killed a bunch of children. And she's like, that's okay. I love you anyway. And that was not the right response.
She doesn't even say that. Like she says nothing. She says nothing. It's like there's red flags, and then there's just like there's a hill that you come to, and it's just covered in red everywhere. And it's just red, 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 red. And she's like, I don't see any red. It's fine. I'm gonna love this man. Like,
yeah, she does
what's
not
wrong?
recognize red flags. Like
she's like, and it's so annoying because she's such an like she's clearly set up as a very intelligent character. It just doesn't. It's like, bruh, bruh. Anyway.
So I've got actually another topic we covered, but I want to ask you how we should approach it here in just a second. But let's just look at some chats here. So Jay says a really good corruption arc, in my opinion, is Boromir. Classic greater good story beat, and I agree. We experience, and this is why I disagree with the idea that the Lord of the Rings is written completely black and white, good and evil and stuff like that, because you see the corruption of Boromir. And
well, the cosmically it is
no, right. But the idea that there's not great characters, right? Yeah, there are definitely great characters, and Boromir is the example of that, and of course, so is Saruman. The leader of the White Council is corrupted as well. So you've got two of those characters who experienced that in the Lord of the Rings, and I love Boromir's arc as well. Yes.
Yeah. And Frodo kind of is, but he's redeemed by himself, by his own previous good actions is what's kind of saves him. So
that's right. That Frodo was a failure. He ends in corruption. Now, because of things beyond his control, the situation still turns out okay. But Frodo himself was a failure.
Well, not beyond his control, because I've heard the argument that it's basically because he was kind to Gollum at a certain point that you can see the ripple effects. Well, and that is so it was his own character that saved his future self.
I accept that. I accept that.
Yeah.
But in the moment when he becomes corrupt, there are other circumstances that yes, he might have started in earlier on, but in that moment, he has failed, and
Yeah,
there are
yeah.
things that go on. Retro Nerd Girl says the Anakin arc in the prequels just wasn't satisfying enough for me. Brianna's so right; his arc is not believable to me as well,
Mm,
and that's why for me, I hadn't recognized the relevance for the story that I'm trying to tell right now, and the study of Anakin Skywalker from the prequels until about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when I was told explicitly to do that. But I have been very interested in the corruption arc because I'm very interested in the fall of Lucifer, which is one of the stories I'm
yeah.
trying to tell. So that and people say I've heard like one approach is like what the prequel trilogy should have been is trying to tell the fall. That it could have been done that way, but it didn't end up well. So
Mm,
I had seen, like, for all the reasons Brianna's talking about and things like that, that we're not seeing a great fall of Lucifer arc in the prequels, and so that's what I want to do. Now I want to tell it directly because I'm actually using the character of Lucifer, but it could have been that. It could have been other things too. I mean, you could have made different decisions about what the
yeah.
prequels are supposed to be, but if you had done that, it wasn't executed well.
Well, I want to make a comment because this is another
Okay.
and we can get into it more later if we want. But because there is a difference in, and we've talked about this before because there was like some confusion too. It's like, wait, what's the difference between a fall and a corruption arc? Because there actually is, and there's a
Okay.
third one too called oh wait, what's it called? There are three negative character arcs. There's the fall, there's the corruption arc, and there's was it not the delusion arc. I'm gonna look it up. I'm actually forgetting what the other one is, but
Okay. No,
but yeah,
you're
basic
right. 'Cause go ahead.
basically the short version is a corruption arc is someone is tempted by a lie and then they embrace the lie, and then a fall arc is someone is embracing a lie and then they have the opportunity to accept the truth but they go deeper into the lie. So they're already at a dark place and they go darker, and then the other one is they they start with a lie, but then they find a truth, but the truth is tragic. I'm trying to remember what the name of that one is. Um,
This was something Brandon and I discussed a lot in our discussion, and yes, so I was brushing by this terminology here, but I think this is an important one. That what is the difference, or is there a difference first of all, and if there is, then what is the difference between telling the story of someone who is corrupted versus the story of the fall? And so, yes, during this discussion right here, I've been playing fast and loose with those terms, but we should get clarification on that Brianna is about to provide. I'm going to run to the front porch one more time.
I am trying to find it. I was searching on KM Wyland's site and it's not coming up. So I'm looking over at my notes for the screenplay. So let's see, 1 second. In my continued study notebook. Where is it? Okay, I think I found it. I think I'm going to actually send this to Heath so he can send it to you guys because I don't have that sort of power. But, so it's the disillusionment arc. Is that what I said? Did I actually say disillusionment? And I said, no, it's not that. That's funny if so. So yeah, it's a really good breakdown. Character believes a lie, they overcome the lie, but the new truth is tragic. So example of that would be The Great Gatsby. That would be an example of the disillusionment arc. Um, Another way to think about it would be like the corruption arc is, someone who I just sent you a link over Facebook if you want to send it
Oh,
send it to them if people want to go deeper into this. Um, what was I just saying? I don't
the
remember.
disillusionment arc, that was Great Gatsby. Now we're moving on to something else.
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say another way to think about the difference between like at least my perception, the way that I'm often using the terms myself, between corruption and fall is I think about the corruption is it's someone becoming like a villain or whatever, someone becoming worse, but they don't necessarily they may or may not face the consequences of them becoming a bad person. But the fall is the consequences. The fall could be someone who's in power who then loses it. So that would be like the end of the Godfather trilogy, for example. So yeah.
Jay says, I agree. His arc, and I believe this is referring to Anakin, is really weird. I guess you could say he does off-screen development.
Hmm.
Yeah. The Retro Nerd Girl says the material that came after Revenge of the Sith actually had more depth to continue his arc. like the I
Oh,
suppose you're
like
talking about like yeah, the
the
animated
animated
stuff.
series? I need
Yeah.
to watch that. I need to watch that, yeah. That's what I've heard, that more of that is in there, so
Jay, this is a fantastic point. I love this book, but I need to read it again. I need that's right here. You're right. I need to read this one
Children of
again.
Hearn?
The Children of Huron.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
gonna add that to my list. Hold on a second.
The Children of Huron. You are right. I need to read this one again and study it with that in mind. Brianna, this is one that was compiled from Tolkien's materials by his son afterwards. It's a later publication.
Interesting.
But you're right. I did really enjoy this one.
Well, I will read it and I will study it with all of the
Let's,
other ones that I
yeah,
am
we should
studying.
read it. Then maybe we should do a stream on it or something like Brianna. Maybe you and I get together and then talk about Children of Huron. That would be really good. Padme is colorblind.
She can't see the color red, at least.
Okay. You're right. Yeah, can't. Yeah, exactly. Can't see the red flags. Okay. Jay, yes. Okay. Then I think this is yes regarding getting together on the Children of Huron. So maybe we should read that one, compare notes, and then do a discussion on the Children of Huron.
It's every
Yeah.
single corruption arc that I've been watching or reading or studying. I'm taking a lot of copious notes. So they will be at this point. I've written the first draft, but they will be applying to for continued drafts and to
Keith
the rest
says
of the
Children of
series.
Huron has been on my shelf for years and I haven't read it yet. I've heard it's fantastic.
I
I
had never even
remember
heard
it
of it,
being
so
really
thank
good.
you.
I remember it being really good. This is oh, I can't. I don't know if I can bring this up, but when I went to the Fell and the Fair, I was on the Fell and the Fair webpage. Excuse me, their Instagram page, the Fell and the Fair Instagram, and I was showing off that they had created the dragon helm of Dolar Mien, which is that helmet right there, out of fiberglass, and they were doing scenes from the Children of Huron. Yeah, Jay says it's written in a different style than Lord of the Rings, but it is amazing.